Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. We come now in this, our third segment of our ongoing series that we call the Seven Churches, to the second of the seven churches. We looked last time at what Jesus told John to speak to the church at Ephesus, and now we come to his message to the church at Smyrna. I'm going to read through this before we take a look at it. He writes, "To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last, who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death." A few bits of background on the city of Smyrna. As we said last time, these seven cities are in Asia Minor. They were, in a manner of speaking, related to each other, were part of a sort of circular trade route, and Smyrna was no exception. It was very wealthy, very beautiful, and it's likely that part of that wealth came from their engagement in the trade of myrrh. And in fact, myrrh and Smyrna have shared root meaning. And myrrh, you will recall, is a spice that was highly valued, but that was also used in the burial of the dead. And so it should not surprise us, therefore, that there's a lot of conversation here about life and death. Now, this was a Roman city, originally Greek, and the Greeks, or those who were settled there, sided with the Romans rather early and became an honored city because of that. But we have here the worship of Roman gods, but also the worship of Caesar. But you've got to remember that Caesars come and go. And so when Jesus begins with the affirmation that he is the first and the last, one of the things that he's telling to his audience is, these false gods that your neighbors worship are nothing. This Caesar that your neighbors worship, he comes and goes. He dies. He's alive and then he's dead. I was dead, but now I'm alive. That's the message that he's giving to these folks as they're about to enter into a season of increased persecution. They're already experiencing a level of persecution. In this wealthy city, they're living in a kind of poverty. And that coming out of the slander of those who purport to be Jews, but as we're told, are not. What's the slander? Well, it's likely that the slander is the typical slander that we would have seen in the first century, that Christians were disloyal to the Roman government, that Christians were guilty of cannibalism because of the Lord's Supper. Those kinds of accusations would put the Christians in this city sort of on the outs socially, and coming soon on the outs with the local government, because the message is, it's going to get worse. It's going to ratchet up. And Jesus is telling them to be prepared, but he's also giving them the message that prepares them. That he is the first and the last, that he is the one who has the power of life, that he can give them the crown of life. Now, there is some dispute about this allusion to 10 days, some disagreement over that. Some suggest that this is a symbol for 10 years, and there was a very specific 10-year time period of persecution in the lifespan of those who would have heard this. That is, if you take the view that I take, that Revelation was written before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., another option is that they were 10 literal days. And there's a connection here because oftentimes if you were charged with a crime in this kind of a context, you would be put in the local jail, and you might be then, if you're found guilty, you might be used as fodder for the games in the local stadium. You might be killed by gladiators or wild animals. And it was typical in that context for you to be in jail for 10 days. It's possible that the gladiatorial games were about to start, and they were going to have 10 days that they were going to have to wait, and that they were going to end up killed. But Jesus tells them to not lose heart, to remember the objective truth that he has already overcome all things, that he can give them a crown of life, and that he will, in fact, do so. As we said from the beginning, the message of this book of Revelation, more than a message about how the world's going to end, is a message to suffering Christians to persevere and to embrace and believe in the glorious truth that Jesus reigns over all things. It's here in this letter. Now, what's not in this letter is any judgment. This is only encouragement. It's interesting, isn't it, that this is one of those churches where Jesus doesn't do the sandwich thing, where he gives you some good news and then he gives you the bad news and then he gives you some more good news. There's bad news here, but none of that bad news involves a lack of faithfulness on the recipients of the letter. We may be coming into increasing persecution ourselves. This is a good place to spend some time and to remember the glorious truth of the reign of Jesus over all things. It's time once again for another Curating Your Movie Library segment. And before we get to it, I need to make a confession that last week I made a mistake in my planning, and I had a hole in this section. And I actually went and ran a rerun. And the rerun was you and I, dear, talking about Virgin River. Mm-hmm. Because I knew that the week after we were going to do Curating Your Movie Library on Virgin River Season 2. Mm. First, let me welcome you again, sweetheart, to Curating Your Movie Library.
Glad to be here.
And I'm glad to have you with me. I'm glad to have you with me when we watch together. And I got to tell you, before we get too far, this is how much we liked Virgin River. That you felt the need to ration it. I don't know that I've ever seen you do that on any series that we've ever watched.
I'm like, don't these people take into consideration Netflix Nazis that just eat up all these series?
Well, yeah, you were like, do you want to watch Virgin River tonight? No.
There's only two
dear. Yeah,
ate them all up in a week. We have to wait a year or 9 months.
Now, one of the things that we said in the last, about the first season, is that this is very gentle kind of drama / soap opera. I would describe it as Northern Exposure meets Hallmark.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. They're quirky characters, but there's real heartfelt and strong issues. And I would also say, and I think you would probably agree, that the drama got a little more intense in season 2.
Yeah, it did.
We still had the humor, but one of the parts of the humor in season 1 was Hope. Hope was just a really interesting character who had quirks that were humorous. But she gets much more actively involved in the drama. She's still humorous, but she's not always fun. Sometimes it's intense. So season 2 ratchets up the intensity, and I have to confess, unfortunately, I was disappointed in this. It also ratcheted it up in one particular scene, on one particular episode. The risqueness. There was a love scene,
the end.
that I didn't think was fitting for the series.
I think they showed her back, but
yes, there was no
showed any actual real nudity parts,
right? But it was still.
And again, it's based on the books.
Yes.
Virgin River. So books we have not read.
Exactly right.
Know if
it's that's in there or not. Yeah. But we did enjoy it, and some of the more intensity of the plot has to do with we get to know a little bit more of the bad guys. Now, what's interesting to me is the first time we meet the bad guys in season 1 is when one of the heroes is actually relatively kind toward them. That is, the doctor goes up. There's a group sort of up in the woods that's involved in drug dealing, and
the pot camp.
Yes, and the doctor goes up and serves these people with his medical skills in season 1. But in season 2, things get a lot more combative between sort of the town and the people outside the town. We also had at least one person pass away, and a cover-up of that. But still, I felt like for all the changes that we've just described, it was more of what we liked. Wouldn't you agree?
I do. Yeah, I do agree.
And we are hopeful and waiting for season number 3.
I just sure wish they put like 30 episodes in a season versus 10 or 12.
Well, and it's an interesting phenomenon, that the change. I've been thinking about this lately. How we used to watch television and how they do it now. That there used to a season was 20 or 22 episodes long, typically. And then you would have a fair number of reruns, and you would only have fresh episodes on sweeps months, and you had to wait. But now you have this opportunity to binge. But what happens at the binge is that when it's over, you have a year or sometimes more to wait before you can watch it again.
Disciplining our flesh, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But here's what's good. I think we haven't tried it yet, but you can. How do I put this? These streaming services have their own math by which they recommend other shows for you. If you liked Virgin, they see you watching Virgin River in the space of 3 days.
Suggested for you.
Yeah, then they make suggestions for you based on that. But you can also do that through Google, and in fact I did. I liked Virgin River. What should I watch next? And I got a nice list, and I've been doing that as well with a lot of the cozy murder mysteries that we tend to enjoy. So we may be coming back with another series. We're looking. We are waiting. At least I am waiting for another series that we've enjoyed to come back, which will happen soon, I think. But Virgin River Season 2, we commend it. We hope you'll enjoy it. And again, as always, we're hoping people will be willing to give us some feedback. Maybe you saw Virgin River and you've got a recommendation for something we don't know about.
Yeah, we'd love to hear about it.
Yes, give us send us a message. Let us know if you liked it or what else you liked. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, sweetheart, for being with me at the movies.
Thank you.
I love you, darling.
I love you too.
Why do we find hardship so hard? Well, the soft answer is because it is hard. The hard answer is because we are soft. When I feel overwhelmed, and I do, when I feel like there's just too much tension in my life, I often go back to D-Day. However difficult a situation might be, I've never been in that kind of situation. I do not struggle to understand why so many soldiers suffer from PTSD. I do struggle to understand why they all don't. Many hardships may seem more difficult than some other people's, but surely there are others whose hardship is more difficult than mine. Perhaps, however, what makes it so difficult is the devil's incessant attacks in the midst of the hardship. He does not flee during our hard times, but attacks, pressing his advantage. He adds insult to injury by insisting that not only are we going through hardship, but that we are going through hardship proves that God is against us. It is one thing to have a health scare, one thing to have month left over after the money is gone, but it is a whole other thing to have the maker of heaven and earth see you as his enemy. Which is why the solution to hardship is rarely to alleviate it. Instead, the solution is always to repent and believe the gospel. We repent for, among other things, our ingratitude. So much of our hardship is grounded in a stubborn refusal to be grateful for the overwhelming blessings we already have. We look at the glass as half empty, forgetting not only that it's half full, but that we are due no glass, no water, and we are in no danger of literally dying of thirst. He leads us beside still waters, and we complain that we're not on a tropical beach watching waves roll in. He brings us to green pastures, and we grumble that it's been a while since he gave us a sugar cube. Repenting and believing the gospel go hand in hand. As we repent for our ingratitude, we enter into gratitude, remembering that even if we are literally dying of thirst, when we're good and dead, we'll be warmly welcomed into paradise. We answer the devil's accusations with God's assurances. Not only does God not see me as his enemy, but he tells me I am his son. Not only is God not pouring out his wrath on me, but he's already poured out his wrath on his son. Which means that every hardship is a gift. The work of God in reshaping us into the glorious image of Jesus. Of course, it hurts to have our rough edges sanded off. Hardships don't come wrapped up as blessings. Often, in fact, they come from others who are intent on hurting you. None of which changes the truth that they are blessings and that they actually help us. Jesus, friends, not only changes everything, but Jesus always wins. and He is the one orchestrating all things. We do not simply grin and bear it. We do not either deny the pain of the pain. Instead, we cry out to the one who loves us, trusting Him and giving thanks. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.